It wasn't an accident, sir. The railing was tampered with.
The silence following my whisper didn't just fall, it crashed. It was heavier than the crystal chandeliers overhead, louder than a gunshot in a library. I felt the phantom press of a cold muzzle against my temple as I looked up into the obsidian eyes of the Devil of Soul and breathed the forbidden words. "Kiss me at midnight, sir." Beside him, his wife stopped breathing. But let me back up. 2 minutes earlier, the world had been loud. The grand ballroom of the Paradise Hotel was a suffocating cage of gold leaf and velvet. The air didn't smell like air. It smelled of ozone, old money, and the sickening sweetness of gardenias trying to mask the scent of moral rot. I stood near the periphery, blending into the cream-colored wallpaper. A ghost in a starch-stiff uniform. My arms trembled under the weight of a silver tray laden with champagne flutes, the crystal stems slick with condensation. "Champagne, sir? Madam?" My voice was a rusted hinge, barely audible over the roar of the soul elite. They didn't see me. They never saw me. To them, I was just a pair of hands extending a drink, a faceless entity meant to serve and disappear. I was Queenie, the help, the invisible stain on their perfect tapestry. 2 minutes. The DJ bellowed over the speakers, his voice booming with forced cheer. 2 minutes until the new year. A cheer went up from the crowd, a wave of noise that vibrated in my chest. Women in silk gowns that cost more than my life's earnings laughed, throwing their heads back, exposing porcelain throats. Men in tuxedos tailored to razor-sharp perfection checked their watches, their cufflinks flashing like warning lights. But my eyes, traitorous, foolish things, were locked on one man. Lee Yong-ki. He stood in the center of the room, a dark void that swallowed the light around him. He wasn't smiling. He never smiled. He wore his tuxedo like armor, the black fabric straining across broad shoulders that carried the weight of the underworld. He held a glass of whiskey, amber liquid swirling as he swirled his wrist, looking utterly bored with the opulence surrounding him. He looked dangerous, lethal, beautiful, and clinging to his arm like a parasitic vine was Nam Soon, his wife. She was resplendent in crimson, a splash of blood against his dark suit. Her nails, manicured into sharp talons, dug into the fabric of his sleeve. She was laughing at something a politician said, a high tinkling sound that grated against my nerves like broken glass. She looked at him with possession, not love. To her, he was a trophy, a weapon to be wielded. She didn't know that when the lights went down, he slept in the guest room. She didn't know about the silence that stretched between them, colder than the Han River in winter. But I knew. 90 seconds. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trying to escape a cage. Why was I moving? My feet seemed to have a mind of their own, carrying me away from the safety of the wall, cutting a path through the throng of bodies. "Excuse me," I murmured, sliding between two towering business tycoons. "I shouldn't be doing this. I should turn around. I should go back to the kitchen, scrub the counters until my knuckles bled, and forget the way his eyes had tracked me in the library 3 nights ago." But the pull was magnetic, irresistible. It was a hunger that had been hollowing me out for 6 months, leaving me brittle and desperate. I stopped 3 feet away from them. The scent of him hit me first. Sandalwood, crisp winter air, and something metallic, like the sharp tang of a blade. It drowned out the gardenias. It made my head spin. Lee Yong-ki turned his head. It was a slow, predatory movement. His gaze swept over the crowd, indifferent, until it snagged on me. Everything stopped. The music faded into a dull hum. The laughter became distant static. The room blurred at the edges, tunneling down until the only thing existing in the universe was the darkness of his eyes. He didn't look away. He didn't dismiss me. His jaw tightened, a muscle feathering beneath the skin. His pupils dilated, swallowing the iris black on black. He knew. He knew exactly why I was there. Nam Soon didn't notice. She was too busy preening for the cameras flashing nearby. "Oh, darling," she cooed, leaning her head on his shoulder, her diamond earrings catching the light. "Another year of ruling the city. Aren't you excited?" Lee didn't answer her. He didn't even blink. He just watched me, I took a step closer. Just one. The tray in my hands shook. The champagne glasses clinked together. A tiny, terrified alarm bell. "Champagne, sir?" I asked. But I wasn't offering the drink. I was offering myself. I was offering my sanity. I was offering my life on a silver platter. Nam-soon finally looked at me. Her eyes narrowed into slits. Disdain rolled off her in waves. "We don't want any, girl. Go away." Her voice was a whip crack. Usually, I would flinch. Usually, I would bow my head, apologize, and retreat into the shadows. Not tonight. Tonight, the adrenaline was a drug in my veins. Tonight, the countdown clock on the wall was ticking away the final seconds of my hesitation. 10. The crowd began to chant. 9. I didn't look at Nam-soon. I looked at him. I looked at the man who terrified the police commissioner. The man who owned the ports, the clubs, and half the politicians in the room. 8. He lowered his whiskey glass. His fingers tightened around the crystal until his knuckles turned white. 7. "I wasn't asking you, madam," I said softly. Nam-soon gasped. The sound was sharp, shocked. "Excuse me? Do you know who you are speaking to, you filth?" 6. "Lee," I whispered. It was the first time I had ever said his name aloud. It tasted like ash and honey. 5. His expression didn't change, but the air around him grew heavy, charged with static electricity. The beast was waking up. 4. I stepped into his personal space. I could feel the heat radiating off his body, searing through the thin fabric of my uniform. 3. Nam-soon was paralyzed with outrage, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. 2. I tilted my head back. My pulse throbbed in my throat, a visible rhythm for him to see. 1. "Kiss me at midnight, sir." The clock struck 12. Fireworks exploded on the screens behind us. The room erupted in cheers. Confetti rained down like snow. But in our small, terrifying circle, there was only silence. Nam-soon's face drained of color. The glass in her hand tilted, spilling red wine down the front of her expensive gown. But she didn't notice. She stared at me with pure, unadulterated hatred. And Lee? Lee dropped his whiskey glass. It hit the floor. The sound of shattering crystal sliced through the room. "Hey friends, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Queenie, girl, you have a death wish. You're thinking that whispering a demand like that to a man who kills people for looking at him wrong is a one-way ticket to the bottom of the ocean. And you're right. It is. Usually, the maid doesn't get the Mafia boss. Usually the maid gets fired, or ignored, or in this family disappears without a trace. But to understand why the shy, invisible girl just risked her life to seduce the most dangerous man in Seoul, to understand why Lee Yong-ki didn't immediately put a bullet in her head, we need to go back. We need to go back 6 months, to the day I signed the contract that sold my soul to the devil. 6 months ago, I wasn't a woman bold enough to demand a kiss from a killer. I wasn't even a woman. I was a ghost haunting the hallways of the Yoido estate, a shadow tasked with scrubbing the sins out of the carpet. I needed this job. My vet school tuition was a mountain of debt I couldn't climb, and my bank account was a hollowed-out shell. So when the agency sent me to the fortress of the Ferrum Syndicate's rival faction, though I didn't know the politics then, only the paycheck, I took it. I walked into the lion's den wearing Payless shoes and a polyester blazer, and I met the lioness first. Nam-soon was beautiful in the way a scalpel is beautiful. Sleek, cold, and capable of cutting you open without making a sound. "You're big," she said. That was the first thing she ever said to me. Not hello. Not welcome. I stood in the foyer clutching my bag. I beg your pardon, madam?" "Big," she repeated, her lip curling as she looked me up and down. She circled me like a shark inspecting a wounded seal. Her finger, tipped with a diamond the size of an eyeball, poked my hip. "You take up too much space. My husband hates clutter." She snapped her fingers at the head housekeeper, put her in the smallest uniform we have, a size 4. If she wants to work in my house, she better learn to shrink. For the next 4 months I lived in a corset of shame. The uniform dug into my waist, the buttons straining across my chest like desperate little prisoners. Every breath was a labor. Every time I bent down to polish the mahogany baseboards, the fabric bit into my skin, leaving angry red welts that throbbed long after my shift ended. Nam-soon loved it. She would sit on the velvet chaise in the solarium, sipping iced tea, watching me struggle to clean the floor-to-ceiling windows. "Miss Queenie," she would trill, her voice sickly sweet syrup. "You missed a spot. Up high. Stretch." She knew I couldn't stretch without the uniform tearing. She wanted to see me humiliate myself. She wanted to see the seams burst, so she could call me sloppy, so she could call me fat. One afternoon, I was on my hands and knees in the library, polishing the legs of a heavy oak table. My knees were bruised. My hands smelled of lemon oil and misery. "Faster," Nam soon commanded from the doorway. She dropped a half-eaten macaron onto the Persian rug I had just cleaned. "Oops. Clean that up. And don't eat it. I know you want to." She laughed. It was a light, airy sound that made my stomach churn with bile. I crawled forward. I reached for the crushed cookie. "Leave it." The voice came from the shadows behind her. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was a rumble of thunder on a clear day. A sound that vibrated through the floorboards and straight into my bones. Nam soon stiffened. Her laughter died instantly. Lee Yong-ki stepped into the light. It was the first time I had seen him up close. He was taller than the photos in the newspapers. Broader. He wore a charcoal suit that fit him like a second skin, tailored to hide the holster I knew sat beneath his left arm. His face was a mask of bored indifference, carved from granite and ice. But his eyes were pits of obsidian, bottomless, soulless, darling. Nam Soon's voice jumped an octave. She rushed to him, grabbing his arm. "I was just training the new help. She's so clumsy." Lee didn't look at her. He didn't even acknowledge her touch. He just stared at the crushed macaron on the rug, and then his gaze lifted. It slid over his wife and landed on me. I froze. I was on my knees, a rag in my hand, sweating in a uniform that was cutting off my circulation. I wanted the floor to open up and swallow me whole. I wanted to dissolve into dust. He looked at me. He didn't look at the uniform. He didn't look at the mess. He looked me in the eye. For a second, the air in the room vanished. The silence stretched, tight and humming like a violin string about to snap. I felt a heat rise up my neck, a flush that had nothing to do with exertion and everything to do with the way his gaze felt heavy, physical, like a hand stroking my cheek. "Get out," he said. Nam soon smirked at me. "You heard him, Queenie. Get out." "Not her," Lee said. His voice dropped, rougher this time. "You..." Nam Soon's mouth fell open. "Me? Lee, this is my house. I want to read," he interrupted. He walked past her, his movement fluid and predatory. He sat in the high-backed leather chair, opened a file, and didn't look up again. "Leave us." Nam Soon turned purple. She glared at me, promising retribution with her eyes, then spun on her heel and stomped out, slamming the heavy double doors behind her. We were alone. The silence returned, but it wasn't empty anymore. It was heavy, thick, scented with the leather of his chair and the sandalwood cologne that clung to his skin. I scrambled to my feet, clutching the rag. I'm sorry, sir. I'll go." "Stay." He didn't look up from his file. I stopped. "Sir?" "Finish the floor," so I did. I polished the wood in a trance. My heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Thump, 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 loud enough that I was sure he could hear it. He sat there for an hour. He never turned a page. He just watched me. I could feel his gaze on my back, on the curve of my hip as I stretched, on the nape of my neck where my hair had escaped its bun. It wasn't the lecherous staring of the wealthy men who visited for poker nights. It was clinical, intense, like a scientist studying a new species of poisonous flower. That was the beginning of the observation. Over the next few weeks, the mansion changed. Nam Soon was still cruel, but the shadows felt different. They felt occupied. Wherever I was, he was there. I would be dusting the hallway, and he would be standing on the balcony above, a cigarette burning in his hand, watching the smoke curl around his fingers as he watched me. I would be weeding the garden in the rain, and I'd see the curtain in his office twitch. He never spoke to me, until the night of the storm. It was 2 a.m. A typhoon was battering Seoul, rain lashing against the windows like gravel. I was in the kitchen. I hadn't eaten since breakfast. Namsoon had hosted a bridge club luncheon and had run me ragged serving tea and tiny cucumber sandwiches, none of which I was allowed to touch. My stomach was a hollow, aching pit. I opened the massive stainless steel refrigerator. It was filled with gourmet ingredients, truffles, imported cheeses, Wagyu beef. But I couldn't take those. The chef counted everything. My eyes landed on a plastic container on the bottom shelf, leftovers from the staff meal I had missed. Cold kimchi stew. I took it out. I didn't bother heating it up. I was too tired, too hungry. I leaned against the counter, the cold light of the fridge illuminating my shame, and lifted a spoon of the cold congealed soup to my lips. "Is that what you eat?" I gasped, dropping the spoon. It clattered onto the marble floor, spraying red broth everywhere. Lee was standing in the doorway. He was in his shirt sleeves, the top buttons undone, his tie hanging loose around his neck. His hair was messy, as if he had been running his hands through it. He looked exhausted. He looked human. I scrambled to grab a paper towel. "I'm sorry, sir. I'm so sorry. I'll clean it up." I didn't steal it, it was just the staff leftovers. He crossed the kitchen in 3 long strides. He didn't look at the mess on the floor. He reached out and took the plastic container from my hand. His fingers brushed mine. Fire. A jolt of electricity arced through my skin, hot and shocking. I snatched my hand back, cradling it against my chest. Lee looked at the cold stew. His lip curled in distaste. He walked to the trash can and dropped it in. "Sir," I protested, panic rising. "That was my dinner." "Not anymore," he growled. He turned to the stove. He grabbed a heavy iron skillet. He opened the fridge and pulled out the Wagyu beef the chef had been saving for the weekend. I stood paralyzed. "Sir, you can't. Madame will act crazy if the beef is missing." "Let her act crazy," he said. His voice was calm, detached. "Sit down. I can't sit in your presence, sir. It's against the rules." He turned to look at me. He held a butcher knife in one hand, the blade glinting under the kitchen lights. "Sit down." I sat. I watched in silence as the devil of Seoul, the man who terrified the city, sliced vegetables with military precision. He seared the beef. The smell of garlic and searing meat filled the kitchen, wrapping around me like a warm blanket. 10 minutes later, he slid a plate in front of me. Steak, perfectly medium rare, sauteed vegetables, a mound of steaming white rice. He didn't make a plate for himself. He leaned his hip against the counter, crossing his arms over his chest. "Eat." I picked up the fork. My hand was shaking. I took a bite. It was the best thing I had ever tasted. It tasted like dignity. "Why?" I whispered, looking up at him. "Why are you doing this?" Lee studied me. His gaze was dark, heavy, traveling from my eyes to my lips. He didn't answer immediately. He reached out, his hand hovering near my face. I flinched. He paused. Then, slowly, incredibly gently, he used his thumb to wipe a smudge of sauce from the corner of my mouth. His skin was rough, calloused, dangerous. "Because," he said, his voice a low rumble that made my toes curl, "you are starving, Queenie. And I don't like seeing my things broken. My things." He didn't say my staff. He didn't say my employees. He said my things. He pulled his hand away, the heat of his touch lingering on my skin like a brand. "Finish it," he commanded. "Every bite. If you leave a single grain of rice, I will feed it to you myself." I looked at him. Really looked at him. And for the first time, I didn't see a boss. I didn't see a monster. I saw a man who was just as hungry as I was. And I realized, with a terrifying clarity that made the blood rush to my head, he wasn't looking at the maid. He wasn't looking at the invisible girl. He was looking at the woman beneath the uniform. And he wanted to devour her. After the steak, the air in the house shifted. The molecules themselves seemed to vibrate with a secret frequency only Lee and I could hear. Summer bled into autumn. The humidity of Seoul broke, replaced by the crisp golden light of October, then the biting winds of November. The leaves in the courtyard turned the color of fire and rust, then fell, leaving the branches bare and skeletal against the gray sky. But inside the mansion the heat was rising. It wasn't a sudden explosion. It was a slow burn, a fever that crept up on me in the quiet moments between chores. Nam Soon was busier than ever, planning the annual charity gala, the New Year's Eve ball, flying to Paris for fittings. Her absence left the house echoing and empty. Except for the library. The library became our confessional, our battleground. I was assigned the night shift for cleaning. This meant I was alone in the West Wing from 10:00 p.m. to 2:00 am, polishing the endless rows of leather-bound books that no one ever read, except him. It started happening every night. I would be on the ladder, dusting the top shelves, the smell of old paper and beeswax thick in my nose. The heavy oak door would creak open. I wouldn't need to look to know who it was. The air pressure would drop, the shadows would lengthen. Lee would enter, silently as a wraith. He would pour himself a drink, always whiskey, neat, and sit in his armchair by the fireplace. He never spoke to me. I never spoke to him. I would continue my work, my duster moving in rhythmic sweeps, but my entire body was attuned to him. I could hear the ice clinking in his glass, the rustle of his shirt as he shifted, the slow, deep intake of his breath. He wasn't reading. I could feel his eyes on me, tracking my movements up and down the ladder, burning through the starch of my uniform. One Tuesday in November, the silence broke. I was high on the ladder, stretching for a copy of Dante's Inferno. The ladder wobbled. It was an antique, beautiful but unstable, like everything else in this house. I gasped, my foot slipping on the polished rung. I flailed, grabbing for the shelf, but my fingers found only air. I fell backward. I squeezed my eyes shut, bracing for the impact, for the shattering of bone on hardwood. But I didn't hit the floor. I hit a wall of muscle and heat. Strong arms caught me, hard and unyielding. The impact knocked the wind out of me. I opened my eyes and found myself cradled against a chest that felt like steel wrapped in cashmere. I looked up. Lee was looking down at me. His face was inches from mine. I could see the flecks of gold in his black eyes, the sharp cut of his cheekbones, the faint shadow of stubble on his jaw. He held me effortlessly, one arm hooked under my knees, the other supporting my back. I was pressed against him, my curves molded to the hard planes of his body. The smell of him, sandalwood, whiskey, and raw, masculine power flooded my senses. It was intoxicating, dizzying. "Careful," he murmured. His voice was a low vibration against my chest. I couldn't breathe. Thank you, sir. You can put me down." I could. He didn't. Instead, his grip tightened slightly. His fingers dug into the soft flesh of my thigh through the thin fabric of my skirt. The touch was possessive, searing. "You're trembling, Queenie. I'm scared of falling, sir." "Are you?" He tilted his head, his gaze dropping to my lips. "Or are you scared of me?" "Both," I whispered. The truth slipped out before I could stop it. Something flickered in his eyes. A hunger. A darkness that wanted to consume. "Good," he said. "Fear keeps you alive." He shifted his weight, and for a terrifying, wonderful second, I thought he was going to kiss me. I thought he was going to bend his head and devour me right there in the library, surrounded by the ghosts of dead poets. My breath hitched. My lips parted involuntarily. "Please," I thought. "Please just do it. Ruin me." The door to the hallway clicked. Lee froze. The intimacy shattered instantly. "Lee?" Nam Soon's voice drifted from the corridor. "Are you in there?" "The florist is on the phone about the centerpieces." He set me down, not gently but quickly. By the time the door opened, I was 5 feet away, furiously dusting a bust of Julius Caesar. Lee was standing by the fireplace, swirling his drink, his back to the door. Nam Soon breezed in, oblivious. "There you are. Honestly, darling, you disappear for hours. Why do you spend so much time in this dusty old room?" "It's quiet," Lee said. He didn't turn around. Nam Soon wrinkled her nose at me. "You're still here? Go to bed. You're breathing up all the air." I bowed. "Yes, madam." As I walked past Lee, he didn't look at me. But as I reached the door, I heard the faint clink of glass against the mantelpiece. "Good night, Queenie," he said. It was soft, almost tender. Nam soon looked confused. "Why are you saying goodnight to the help?" "Because," Lee said, his voice dropping back to that icy, dangerous tone he used with the rest of the world. "She has manners. Unlike some." I ran to my room, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I lay in my narrow bed, staring at the ceiling, tracing the phantom sensation of his hands on my body. I knew then that I was in trouble. Deep, dangerous trouble. December arrived in a flurry of snow and stress. The house was transformed into a winter wonderland for the New Year's Eve gala. Garlands of silver and blue draped every banister. A 20-foot spruce tree dominated the foyer. The tension between Lee and Nam soon grew sharper, colder. They argued in hushed tones behind closed doors, about money, about his business associates, about her spending. He slept in the guest wing every night now. And every night I would find small things left for me. A new pair of gloves on my cleaning cart, lined with cashmere to protect my hands from the cold water. A bottle of expensive vitamins on my nightstand. Once, a single perfect white rose hidden behind the cleaning supplies in the pantry. No notes. No words. Just silent, protective gestures. And then, New Year's Eve. The day was a blur of panic. The florists, the caterers, the musicians, everyone was screaming, rushing, demanding. I was a whirlwind of motion, fetching, carrying, polishing. By 11 p.m. I was exhausted. My feet were bleeding in my cheap shoes. My head was pounding. I was stationed in the ballroom holding a tray of champagne. The air was thick with perfume and the false laughter of people who hated each other. I saw Lee across the room. He looked magnificent, deadly. He was surrounded by men who feared him and women who wanted him. But he looked lonely. He stood in the center of the crowd, completely alone. And then, he saw me. The look he gave me across the crowded ballroom wasn't the look of a master to a servant. It was the look of a drowning man seeing a lifeline. It was a look of raw, naked need. It pulled me. It dragged me across the floor, past the socialites, past the guards, past his wife. It brought me to this moment. 11:58 p.m. The memory of the last 6 months, the library, the steak, the rose, the silence, crashed into me. I wasn't just the maid anymore. I wasn't just a ghost. I was the woman who knew what he liked to read. I was the woman who knew he hated the cold. I was the woman who knew that beneath the monster, there was a man who just wanted to be seen. And I was tired of being invisible. I stood before him, the tray trembling in my hands, the countdown echoing in my ears. 10, 9, 8. The world narrowed down to his eyes. "Kiss me at midnight, sir." And now, we are back. The glass has shattered. The silence is deafening. And the devil of soul is looking at me like he's deciding whether to kill me or worship me. The sound of Lee's whiskey glass shattering on the marble floor was the only thing louder than the beating of my own heart. For a second, the entire ballroom suspended in animation. The shards of crystal lay glittering near my scuffed work shoes like diamonds I could never afford. Nam soon broke the silence first. Her laughter was high, brittle, and ugly. "Oh my God," she shrieked, clutching her chest. "Look at her. She's drunk." Security. She turned to the crowd, her face a mask of performative pity. "I am so sorry, everyone. It's so hard to find good help these days. This one has obviously been stealing from the liquor cabinet." She spun back to me, her eyes venomous slits. She took a step forward, her red heel crunching on the broken glass. "Clean it up," she hissed, her voice low enough that only Lee and I could hear. "Get on your knees, you cow, and clean it up with your bare hands. And when you're done, get out of my house." I didn't move. My eyes were locked on Lee. He hadn't moved since the glass fell. His hands were empty now, hanging by his sides. His gaze was unreadable, a dark ocean under a storm. I said. Nam soon raised her voice, raising her hand as if to strike me. "Get on your knees." Her hand swept down. I flinched, bracing for the sting. It never came. Lee's hand shot out. It was a blur of motion, faster than thought. He caught Nam Soon's wrist mid-air, inches from my face. The grip was hard. I could see his fingers indenting her skin. Lee. Nam Soon gasped, her eyes widening in shock. What are you doing? She's... Don't, Lee said. One word. Quiet. Lethal. He shoved her hand away, not violently, but with a dismissal that was far more insulting. He turned his back on her. He turned his back on the wife, the heiress, the partner of the Ferrum syndicate. He turned to me. The DJ, oblivious or terrified, shouted into the microphone. 10 seconds to midnight. The crowd, sensing the shift in the air, hesitated. The chanting was ragged, uncertain. 10. Lee took a step toward me. He stepped right over the broken glass. He didn't care about the mess. He didn't care about the shoes. 9. You asked me something, he said. His voice was gravel and smoke. It vibrated in the floorboards. 8. I trembled. Tears pricked my eyes, hot and stinging. Sir. 7. He reached out. His hand cupped my cheek. His palm was rough, warm, real. It was the only anchor in a world that was spinning off its axis. Say it again, he commanded. 6. Nam Soon was screaming behind him. Lee, have you lost your mind? She is the maid. 5. He ignored her. He stared at me with a hunger that burned away the oxygen in the room. He looked at my lips. 4. I leaned into his touch. I closed my eyes, inhaling the scent of him. 3. Kiss me, I whispered, the words broken and desperate. Kiss me at midnight. 2. His other arm wrapped around my waist, pulling me flush against him. The tray clattered from my hands, crashing to the floor, joining the whiskey glass in ruin. 1. As you wish, Queenie. The clock struck 12. The fireworks erupted outside, painting the room in flashes of red and gold. But I didn't see them. Lee crushed his mouth to mine. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It wasn't a movie kiss. It was a collision. It was a reclaiming. It was the starving man finally getting his feast. His lips were hot, demanding, bruising. He tasted of whiskey and suppressed rage. He kissed me like he was angry at me for making him wait this long, and like he worshipped the ground I walked on. I gasped, my hands flying up to grip the lapels of his tuxedo. I held on for dear life as he devoured me. The room exploded, not with cheers, but with gasps. The flashes of cameras went off like strobe lights, blinding and chaotic. Lee didn't stop. He deepened the kiss, his tongue sweeping into my mouth, claiming me, marking me, branding my soul with his taste. He tilted my head back, his hand tangling in my hair, ruining the severe bun Nam Soon had forced me to wear. My hair cascaded down my back. The hairpin clattered to the floor. For a long suspended eternity, there was nothing but him. The heat of his body, the hardness of his chest, the desperate, frantic rhythm of our mouths moving together. Then, slowly, he pulled back. He didn't let me go. He kept his arm clamped around my waist, holding me against his side like a shield, like a prize. He looked at the crowd. His eyes were wild. His chest was heaving. He looked like a king who had just slaughtered an army. Lee. Nam Soon's voice was a shriek of pure hysteria. She was shaking, her face a mask of ruined mascara and rage. What is this? What are you doing with this? This trash? Lee looked at her. His expression was cold, devoid of any emotion. I'm done, he said. His voice carried to every corner of the silent ballroom. Done? Nam Soon laughed, a manic, terrifying sound. You can't be done. We have a contract. We have an image. You are Lee Yong-ki. You belong to me. The contract is terminated, Lee said. He looked at the reporters, at the cameras. Write this down. The marriage was a business arrangement. The business is concluded. He pulled me tighter. And if anyone touches her, if anyone looks at her with anything other than respect, he let the threat hang in the air. It was heavier than lead. She is mine, he finished. The crowd erupted into whispers. The flashbulbs went crazy. I looked up at him, my lips swollen, my heart hammering. He chose me. The devil of soul chose the invisible girl. But the fairy tale didn't last. Nam Soon stopped screaming. She went very, very still. She wiped the smeared lipstick from her mouth with the back of her hand. Her eyes went dead. She took a step closer to us. The security guards hesitated, unsure if they should stop the boss's wife. She stopped right in front of me. She didn't look at Lee. She looked at me. And she smiled. It was a smile that chilled my blood to absolute zero. "You stupid, stupid girl," she whispered. "Do you think this is a romance novel? Do you think he can just walk away?" She reached into her clutch. Lee tensed, his hand going to his waistband, reaching for a gun that wasn't there. But she didn't pull out a weapon. She pulled out a phone. She showed me the screen. It was a text message. A single photo. It was a picture of Lee. But he was in the crosshairs of a sniper scope. The red dot was centered right between his eyes. The sender ID read, Chairman Jang. Nam soon leaned in, her lips brushing my ear. Chairman Jang has been waiting for a breach of contract. He's been waiting for a weakness. And look, Lee just gave him one. A big, soft, vulnerable weakness. My blood ran cold. "If he stays with you," Nam soon whispered, her voice like poison honey, "Jang will kill him. Tonight, the moment he steps out of this hotel with you, the Zerdev Bratva and Jang's men will tear him apart. He is powerful, Queenie, but he isn't invincible. Not when he's distracted by a piece of trash like you." She pulled back, her eyes gleaming with triumph. "So enjoy your kiss, Cinderella. It's going to be the kiss of death. Panic." Cold, suffocating panic clawed at my throat. I looked at Lee. He was busy glaring at a photographer who had gotten too close. He didn't see the photo. He didn't know. He thought he had won. He thought he was saving me. But he wasn't. I was killing him. Nam Soon was right. I wasn't an asset. I wasn't a partner. I was a target. I was the chink in his armor that would let the arrow through. If I stayed, he died. The realization hit me harder than the floor. I had to run. I had to disappear. I looked at his profile, the strong jaw, the fierce eyes, the lips that had just claimed me. I loved him. I loved him enough to break my own heart. "Lee," I whispered. He looked down at me, his eyes softening instantly. "It's over, Queenie. We're leaving. I'm taking you to the penthouse. I need to use the ladies' room first," I lied. My voice shook. "Please. I need a moment. To fix my dress." He hesitated. He didn't want to let me go. "I'll wait right here." "Don't be long, I won't," I promised. A lie. I pulled away from his warmth. The cold air hit me immediately. I turned and walked toward the exit. I forced myself not to run until I was out of the ballroom. I forced myself not to look back. Because if I looked back, I would stay. And if I stayed, the devil of soul would burn. I burst through the double doors and sprinted. Not toward the bathroom, toward the service exit, toward the alleyway, toward the darkness. The service door slammed shut behind me, cutting off the warmth, the music, and the smell of expensive perfume. Silence. Then, the cold hit me like a physical blow. It was snowing. Big, heavy flakes drifted down from a sky the color of bruised iron. The wind howled down the alleyway, cutting through my thin maid's uniform like a knife. I gasped, the air freezing the moisture in my lungs. I didn't have a coat. I didn't have my purse. I didn't have anywhere to go. I just ran. My cheap black flats slipped on the icy asphalt. I stumbled, scraping my hands against the rough brick wall, but I pushed off and kept moving. I had to get away. I had to put miles between me and the Paradise Hotel before Nam soon sent the text. Before the red dot appeared on Lee's forehead. "I love you," I thought, the words a jagged rhythm matching my footsteps. "I love you, so I'm leaving you." Tears streamed down my face, hot and fast, freezing on my cheeks before they could reach my chin. I reached the end of the alley. The streetlights flickered overhead, casting long skeletal shadows on the snow. I turned right, towards the subway station. If I could just get on a train. Any train. Whoa, pause. You didn't think we were getting a happily ever after that easily, did you? Come on, friends. This is a dark romance. The happiness is just the calm before the hurricane. Right now, Queenie thinks she's saving him. But she forgot one thing. Monsters don't like it when you touch their property. If you want to see the god of death wake up and choose absolute violence, hit that like button. And if you're new here, make sure you subscribe right now because you do not want to miss what Lee Yong-ki is about to do to these men. Things are about to get messy. I made it 3 blocks. The streets were empty. Everyone was inside, celebrating the new year. The world felt abandoned, apocalyptic. I heard the engine before I saw it. A low, purring growl. I stiffened, glancing over my shoulder. A black van was rolling slowly down the street, its headlights off. It moved like a shark in dark water. Panic spiked in my chest. I walked faster, my breath coming in short, terrified puffs. The van accelerated. Run. I bolted. I abandoned dignity and sprinted across the icy sidewalk. The tires screeched against the pavement. The van swerved, mounting the curb and cutting me off. I skidded to a halt, turning to run the other way, but the side door slid open with a metallic hiss. 2 men jumped out. They were huge, wearing thick leather jackets and ski masks. No, I screamed. The sound was swallowed by the snow. I lunged for the gap between the van and the wall. A hand grabbed my arm. Hard. Fingers dug into my bicep, bruising the bone. Get off me. I shrieked. I fought. I used every ounce of strength scrubbing floors had given me. I kicked backward, my heel connecting with a shin. The man grunted, his grip loosening for a fraction of a second. I wrenched free. I spun around, ready to claw his eyes out. But I wasn't fast enough. A second pair of arms locked around my waist from behind. A gloved hand clamped over my mouth, smelling of old leather and tobacco. They dragged me toward the open maw of the van. I thrashed. I bit the leather glove. I screamed into the palm, a muffled, useless sound. Easy, girl, a voice said from inside the van. It wasn't one of the thugs. It was a smooth, cultured voice. I was thrown inside. I landed hard on the metal floor, my hip slamming against a tire well. The door slammed shut, sealing us in darkness. A light flickered on. I scrambled backward, pressing myself against the cold metal wall, my chest heaving. Sitting on the bench seat opposite me was an older man. He wore a pristine white suit that looked jarring against the grime of the van. He held a cane topped with a silver cobra. Chairman Zhang. The rival. He smiled. It was a grandfatherly smile that didn't reach his reptilian eyes. Happy New Year, Miss Queenie, Zhang said. Nam soon sends her regards. Let me go, I gasped. I left him. I did what she wanted. I left. Zhang chuckled. He tapped his cane on the floor. Oh, I know, and that was very noble of you. But see, the problem with Lee Yong-ki is that he is persistent. If you simply run away, he will look for you. He will turn over every stone. He leaned forward. The smell of peppermint and decay wafted off him. But if I have you, Zhang whispered, if I send him a piece of you, well, then he will walk right into my trap. Won't he? My blood froze. Driver, Zhang said calmly, go. The van lurched forward. I lunged for the door handle. Zhang didn't even move. One of the guards backhanded me. The world exploded in white light, then faded to gray. I slumped against the wall, the taste of copper filling my mouth. As consciousness slipped away, the only thing I could think of was Lee. I'm sorry, I thought. I tried. Meanwhile, back in the ballroom, 10 minutes had passed. Lee Yong-ki stood by the pillar, checking his watch for the 5th time. She's taking too long, he muttered. His head of security, a man named Dae-soo, stepped closer. Women take time in the powder room, boss. Maybe she's fixing her makeup. No, Lee said. A cold knot was forming in his stomach. A primal instinct, honed by years of surviving assassination attempts, was screaming at him. Wrong. Something is wrong. He turned toward the ladies' room. He didn't care about propriety. He didn't care about the scandal. He kicked the door open. Queenie? A few socialites reapplying lipstick screamed and clutched their pearls. Get out, Lee barked. They scrambled past him. The room was empty. No Queenie. He checked the stalls. Empty. He saw the window. It was cracked open, letting in a draft of freezing air. But it was too small for a person. He spun around, marching back into the hallway. His eyes scanned the floor. And then he saw it. Near the service exit door, lying in a crumpled heap like a dead bird. Her apron, the white, frilly thing Nam Soon had forced her to wear, the symbol of her servitude. Lee walked over to it. The crowd parted for him, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. The temperature in the hallway seemed to drop 10 degrees. He knelt. He picked up the apron. It was still warm. He brought it to his face. He inhaled. Lemon soap. Fear. And underneath it all, her scent. Vanilla and rain. He closed his fist around the fabric. "Boss," Daesu said nervously, tapping his earpiece. The perimeter guards found tracks in the snow. Rear alley. There was a struggle. Tire marks. Lee stood up. The transition was instantaneous. The man who had kissed the maid, the man who had shown a flicker of vulnerability, of hope, died. In his place stood the god of death. His face went slack, completely void of emotion. His eyes became dead sharks. The air around him crackled with a terrifying, silent violence. "Daesu," Lee said. His voice was a whisper, but it carried more weight than a scream. "Yes, boss? I'll rally the men. We'll send out search parties." "No." Lee tucked the apron into his tuxedo jacket, right over his heart. He walked toward the exit. He didn't run. He walked with the slow, inevitable cadence of a funeral march. "No men," Lee said. He reached under his jacket, and finally withdrew the gun he had promised not to bring tonight. He racked the slide. Click-clack. "They took my wife," Lee said. He pushed the doors open, stepping out into the blizzard without a coat. The snow didn't dare touch him. "I'm going to kill them all myself." The warehouse sat on the edge of the Incheon docks, a rotting tooth in the mouth of the harbor. It smelled of rust, dead fish, and gasoline. The wind whistled through gaps in the corrugated metal walls, a mournful, hollow sound. Inside, I was tied to a chair in the center of the vast, empty space. My wrists were raw from the rope. My cheek throbbed where the guard had hit me. The cold was a living thing, biting through my thin uniform, turning my blood to slush. Chairman Jang sat on a crate 10 feet away, cleaning his fingernails with a small knife. 6 of his men stood in a circle around me, guns drawn, their breath puffing white in the freezing air. "He's late," Jang muttered, checking his gold pocket watch. "Disappointing." "He's not coming," I whispered through chattering teeth. "I told you, he doesn't care." Jang looked at me with pity. "My dear, you really don't understand men like him, do you? He doesn't come for love. He comes for ownership." Boom. The sound wasn't a knock. It was the massive metal sliding door being kicked off its track. The heavy steel groaned, buckled, and crashed to the concrete floor with a deafening clang that shook the dust from the rafters. Silence. The wind swirled in, carrying snow and the scent of the sea. And him. Lee Yong-ki stood in the opening. He was a silhouette against the gray night. He wore no coat. His tuxedo shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, his tie gone. He stood perfectly still, his hands hanging loose at his sides. He didn't look like a man. He looked like a judgment, fire. Jang screamed, scrambling off the crate. 6 guns fired at once. 3 sharp reports rang out. Bang, bang, bang. Muzzle flashes lit up the warehouse like a strobe light. Bullets sparked off the concrete, pinged against metal beams. Lee was gone. He moved faster than the eye could track. He dove into the shadows of the shipping containers to his left. "Fan out," one of the guards shouted. "Find him." The lights went out. Someone had cut the power. The warehouse plunged into absolute darkness. For a second, there was nothing. No sound. No movement. Just the heavy, terrified breathing of the 6 men. Then, a wet, sickening thud. A gurgle. The sound of a body hitting the floor. "Kim?" A guard whispered. "Kim, report." Silence. Crack. The sound of a bone snapping. A short, sharp scream that was cut off abruptly. "He's here," someone shrieked. "He's right he." Bang. A single gunshot. Then the sound of a gun skittering across the concrete. I sat frozen in my chair, blind and terrified. I couldn't see anything, but I could hear it. I could hear the violence. It was precise, efficient, terrifying. It wasn't a fight. It was an extermination. Switch to night vision. Jang yelled from somewhere in the back. Kill him. A flashlight beam sliced through the darkness. It landed on a guard. He was flying through the air. Lee had thrown him. The guard crashed into 2 others, knocking them down like bowling pins. Lee stepped into the beam of light. He was covered in blood. Not his own. He held a knife in one hand. A blade he must have taken from one of them. His face was a mask of cold fury. He didn't look human. He looked like a demon who had crawled out of hell to drag sinners back down with him. 2 guards charged him. He didn't retreat. He stepped in. He ducked a swinging fist. He slashed the knife across a hamstring. The man went down screaming. Lee spun. He grabbed the second man's gun arm. Snap. The arm broke at the elbow. He slammed the man's head into a steel pillar. The man dropped. Silence fell again. Only 1 guard left. And Jang. The last guard was shaking. He held his gun with both hands, aiming it at Lee's chest. Stay back, I'll shoot. I swear to God. Lee walked toward him. He didn't run. He walked. The guard fired. Lee tilted his head. The bullet grazed his cheek, leaving a thin line of red. He didn't blink. He reached the guard. He grabbed the gun barrel. The heat should have burned his hand. He didn't care. He wrenched the weapon away and tossed it aside. He grabbed the guard by the throat. He lifted him off the ground. 1 hand. Where is she? Lee asked. His voice was a low growl. The guard gagged, his feet kicking uselessly. He pointed a trembling finger toward the center of the room. Toward me. Lee dropped him. The man crumpled, gasping for air, too terrified to move. Lee turned. He saw me. The monster vanished. His shoulders slumped, the tension drained from his frame, replaced by something desperate and raw. He ran to me. He dropped to his knees in front of my chair. His hands hovered over me, afraid to touch, afraid he was too bloody, too violent. Queenie, he breathed. Lee, I sobbed. Behind you. Jang stepped out from behind a crate. He had a small pistol. He aimed it at Lee's back. Touching, Jang sneered. Truly. Lee didn't turn around. He didn't look at Jang. He looked at me. He looked at the rope cutting into my wrists. Close your eyes, Queenie, he whispered. Lee, he has a gun. Close. Your eyes. I closed them. Bang. I flinched. But I didn't hear a body fall. I heard a scream. Jang's scream. I opened my eyes. Lee had moved. He was standing over Jang. He had thrown the knife. It was embedded in Jang's shoulder, pinning him to the wooden crate. The gun lay on the floor. Lee leaned down. He whispered something in Jang's ear. I couldn't hear what it was, but Jang's face went pale white. He stopped screaming. He looked at Lee with pure, unadulterated horror. Lee straightened up. He turned back to me. He pulled a small pocket knife from his trousers. He cut the ropes. My hands fell free. I tried to stand, but my legs were numb. I stumbled. He caught me. He swept me up into his arms, cradling me against his chest. He didn't care about the blood on his shirt. He didn't care about the dirt on my uniform. He buried his face in my neck. He inhaled sharply, a shudder racking his body. I have you, he murmured into my skin. I have you. I have you. You're bleeding, I whispered, reaching up to touch the cut on his cheek. It's not mine, he said. He turned and walked toward the exit. He walked over the bodies of the men who had touched me. He didn't look down. Outside, the snow had stopped. The air was silent and clean. A sleek black sedan screeched to a halt in front of the warehouse. Dae-soo jumped out, opening the back door. Lee gently placed me on the leather seat. He climbed in after me, pulling me into his lap. Home, he said to the driver. The estate boss? No, Lee said, his arms tightening around me. The penthouse. No one enters. No one leaves. If Nam soon calls, tell her she's a widow. The car pulled away. I rested my head on his shoulder, listening to the steady, strong beat of his heart. I was safe. But as I looked at his hand, resting on my thigh, I saw the knuckles were split and bloody. The maid had asked for a kiss. The monster had burned down the world to give it to her. The penthouse was a fortress of glass and steel floating above the city, but tonight, it felt like a cathedral. The elevator doors slid open with a hushed whisper. Lee didn't put me down. He carried me across the threshold, his footsteps silent on the marble floors. The air here was different. It didn't smell of fear or snow or old money. It smelled of him, cedar, rain, and the deep, earthy scent of safety. He walked past the sprawling living room with its panoramic view of the Seoul skyline. He walked past the kitchen where he had once fed me steak. He walked straight into the master suite. "Lee," I whispered, my voice raspy. "I can walk. You never have to walk again if you don't want to," he murmured against my hair. He carried me into the bathroom. It was a cavern of black marble and gold fixtures. He set me down gently on the vanity counter, his hands lingering on my waist as if he were afraid I would vanish if he let go. He turned on the tap. Steam began to rise, curling into the air like white ghosts. Lee turned back to me. He looked wrecked. His tuxedo shirt was stained with rust-colored blood. His hair was wild, and his eyes were raw. The obsidian shields were gone. In their place was a naked, terrifying devotion. He reached out. His fingers, trembling slightly, touched the top button of my maid's uniform. "May I?" he asked. The question hung in the humid air. The man who commanded armies, the man who had just slaughtered 6 men without blinking, was asking for permission to undress me. I nodded. One by one, he undid the buttons. The cheap polyester fell away, pooling on the floor like a shed skin. The uniform that had defined me, constricted me, and made me invisible was gone. I sat before him in my simple cotton undergarments, shivering not from cold, but from the intensity of his gaze. He didn't look at me with lust. He looked at me with reverence. He traced the bruise on my arm with a feather-light touch, his jaw tightening. "I will kill him again," he growled softly. "I will bring him back from hell and kill him again for touching you." "It's over," I whispered, cupping his face. His stubble grazed my palm. "I'm here." He leaned into my touch, closing his eyes. A long, shuddering breath left his lungs. "Let me take care of you, Queenie." He lifted me again and lowered me into the tub. The water was hot, biting at my frozen skin, shocking my system back to life. It smelled of lavender and bergamot, a dark, masculine floral scent that made my head spin. Lee knelt beside the tub. He rolled up his sleeves, exposing the corded muscles of his forearms, the tattoos of the Ferrum Syndicate winding around his wrists like ink chains. He picked up a sponge. He soaped it until it was heavy with white foam. Then, he began to worship. He washed my arms first. Long, slow strokes. He washed the soot from the warehouse off my skin. He washed the memory of the ropes away. He treated my body not as a servant's tool, but as a priceless artifact he had recovered from the ruins. "You are so beautiful," he said, his voice thick. "I used to watch you dust the vases in the hallway, and I would get jealous of the porcelain. I wanted your hands on me." I gasped as the sponge moved over my chest, the warm water cascading down my sternum. "You watched me?" "I never stopped watching you," he confessed. He dropped the sponge and used his hands. His rough, calloused palms glided over my wet skin, creating a friction that sent sparks shooting through my veins. "From the moment you walked into that house, you were the only thing in color. Everything else was gray." He washed my legs. He lifted my foot, massaging the arch where the cheap shoes had blistered my skin. He brought my foot to his lips, kissing the instep. It was an act of submission, the king kneeling before the peasant. "Lee." "No," he said, looking up at me through the steam. His eyes were dark, dilated pools of desire. "Not Lee. Not Sir. Say my name, the one only you know." "Yong-ki," I breathed. He shuddered. He finished washing me, rinsing the soap away with a silver cup. Then, he lifted me out of the water. He wrapped me in a towel as thick and soft as a cloud. He patted me dry, his hands learning the topography of my body, the curve of my hip, the dip of my waist, the slope of my shoulder. He carried me to the bed. It was vast, covered in sheets of black silk that rippled like oil. He laid me down in the center of it. He stood by the side of the bed and finally stripped off his ruined clothes. The bloody shirt hit the floor. The trousers followed. He stood before me, glorious and terrifying. His body was a map of violence, scars, tattoos, muscle. But tonight, he belonged to me. He crawled onto the bed, moving over me like a storm front. He didn't crush me. He bracketed my body with his arms, caging me in, creating a world where only the two of us existed. "You tried to leave me," he whispered, his face inches from mine. "I wanted to save you," I cried softly. "You are my salvation, Queenie." He lowered his head, his lips brushing against the pulse fluttering in my throat. "If you leave, I burn. Do you understand? You hold the match." "I won't leave," I promised. "Never again, good." He kissed me. It wasn't like the kiss at the gala. That was a public claiming this. This was a private devouring. His mouth moved over mine with a slow, agonizing deliberation. He tasted of mint and iron. He kissed me until my lips felt swollen, until my breath came in short, jagged gasps. His hands were everywhere. They tangled in my hair, spreading the dark tresses across the black silk like a halo. They gripped my hips, pulling me flush against the heat of his erection. "Mine," he growled against my mouth. "My wife. My queen. My life. Yours," I moaned, arching into him. He shed the last of the barriers between us. Skin met skin. Fire met gasoline. When he entered me, he didn't just fill my body. He filled the hollow spaces in my soul. He moved with a slow, rhythmic power, a cadence that matched the beating of my heart. Thump, thump, thump. I wrapped my legs around him, anchoring him to me. I ran my hands down his back, feeling the ripple of muscle, the tension of a man holding himself back, trying to be gentle when every instinct screamed at him to conquer. "Let go," I whispered into his ear. "Yonki, let go." He groaned, a sound torn from the depths of his chest. And he did. The rhythm shattered. He moved faster, harder, driving into me with a desperation that bordered on pain. It was a collision of souls. It was the storm finally breaking. I met him thrust for thrust. I wasn't the shy maid anymore. I was the woman who had brought the devil to his knees. I clawed at his shoulders. I whispered his name like a prayer. I shattered beneath him. "Look at me," he commanded, his voice strained. I opened my eyes. He was watching me. His face was a mask of ecstasy and agony. He watched me come undone. He watched the way my head fell back, the way my body convulsed in his arms. And as the wave of pleasure crashed over me, pulling a scream from my throat, he followed me into the abyss. He collapsed against me, his heavy weight pressing me into the mattress. He buried his face in the crook of my neck, his breathing ragged and harsh. We lay there for a long time, tangled in the black silk, limbs entwined, hearts slowly sinking their rhythm. The silence of the penthouse wasn't empty anymore. It was full. Lee lifted his head. He brushed a damp lock of hair from my forehead. His eyes were soft now. The storm had passed. "Happy New Year, Queenie," he whispered. I smiled, tracing the line of his jaw. "Happy New Year, Yonki." He kissed my forehead, then pulled the duvet up over us, cocooning us against the world. "Sleep," he said. "Tomorrow, we rewrite the rules. 1 year later, time is a funny thing. 365 days ago, I was invisible. I was a ghost in a polyester uniform, shivering in the periphery of someone else's life. Now, I am the center of the universe. I stood on the balcony of the penthouse, the wind whipping my hair, but I didn't feel the cold. I was wrapped in a floor-length gown of gold velvet that cost more than the house I grew up in. A diamond the size of a quail's egg weighed heavy and warm on my left ring finger. Behind me, the television in the lounge was playing the evening news on mute. I caught a glimpse of the headline. Former socialite Nam soon sentenced to 20 years for conspiracy to commit murder. The image showed her being led away in handcuffs. She wasn't wearing red silk anymore. She was wearing an oversized orange jumpsuit that swallowed her whole. Her hair was frizzy, her makeup gone, her face a mask of bitter defeat. I picked up the remote and turned the TV off. She didn't matter. She was a ghost now. "Champagne?" Madam? I turned. Lee stood in the doorway. He was holding 2 crystal flutes. He wasn't wearing a tuxedo. He was wearing black cashmere sweatpants and a t-shirt that stretched tight across his chest. He looked relaxed. He looked happy. He walked toward me, the city lights reflecting in his dark eyes. "You're mocking me," I teased, taking the glass. "I'm serving you," he corrected. His voice was a low rumble that vibrated through the floorboards and straight into my bare feet. "There is a difference." He stepped out onto the balcony, closing the glass door behind him to shut out the noise of the party happening downstairs. We had invited friends this year. Real friends. No politicians. No snakes. Lee moved behind me. He wrapped his arms around my waist, pulling me back against his chest. He rested his chin on my shoulder, inhaling the scent of my hair. "What are you thinking about?" he murmured. "Last year," I admitted, leaning into his warmth. "I was terrified. I thought you were going to have me killed for speaking to you." Lee chuckled. It was a dark, rich sound. "I thought I was going to die if I didn't taste you." He pressed a kiss to the sensitive spot just below my ear. I shivered, spilling a drop of champagne onto the snow-dusted railing. "You saved me, Queenie," he whispered. "You woke me up." I turned in his arms. I looked up at the devil of soul, my monster, my protector, my love. The harsh lines of his face had softened over the last year, smoothed out by peace and the knowledge that he was no longer alone in the dark. I reached up, tracing the faint white scar on his cheek where the bullet had grazed him that night in the warehouse. "You saved yourself, Yong-Ki," I said softly. "I just gave you a reason to." From down in the city streets, the sound of cheering began to swell. A distant roar of millions of people counting down the seconds. 10. Lee's eyes locked onto mine. The intensity was still there, that bottomless obsidian hunger, but now it was mixed with an adoration that made my knees weak. 9. He set his glass down on the railing. He didn't want the drink. He wanted me. 8. He pulled me closer, his hand splaying across the small of my back, possessive and firm. 7. "Are you going to demand it again?" he asked, a smirk playing on his lips. "Or do I have to guess?" 6. I smiled. I ran my hands up his chest, feeling the steady, powerful beat of his heart under the cashmere. 5. "I don't demand any more," I whispered. "I take." 4. His pupils dilated. He lowered his head, his breath mingling with mine in the frosty air. 3. I went up on my tiptoes. 2. "It's almost midnight, husband." 1. "Kiss me." The clock struck 12. Fireworks exploded over the Han River, painting the sky in violent bursts of violet and gold. The city erupted in noise. But on our balcony, high above the world, there was only the sound of a promise being kept. Lee kissed me. Deep, slow, and full of a love that had survived the fire. The maid was gone. The invisible girl was gone. The queen had claimed her king. And that, my friends, is how the shy maid conquered the most dangerous man in Seoul. It wasn't with a weapon. It wasn't with a scheme. It was with 3 little words whispered at the stroke of midnight. She risked everything, her job, her safety, her life, for a chance at a love that burned brighter than the stars. And in the end, she didn't just get the guy. She got the kingdom. Now, I have to ask you, if you were standing in that ballroom, with a tray of champagne in your shaking hands and a monster staring back at you, would you be brave enough to whisper that line? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, do me a favor, smash that like button until it breaks, and hit subscribe. We have plenty more dark secrets to uncover. Until next time, sweet dreams, and watch out for the midnight hour.